Caitlin Clark running the show in women's college basketball. She's about to do it in the WNBA. But there is a column at the USA Today from Lindsay Schnell with this, titled this, Women's Basketball Needs Faces of Future to be Black. Enter Juju Watkins and Hannah Hidalgo, saying that in a game, in a sport that's dominated by black players in women's hoops, that the WNBA is 70% black. Too often that black players who built women's hoops haven't been acknowledged. Saying that it's important that the future of women's college basketball is black instead of white, like Caitlin Clark. Chad, looking back on the last 2 or 3 decades of women's college basketball, I think of Shamika Holdsclaw, Cheryl Miller, I think of Candace Parker, and while you have Diana Taurasi,
I think of Cheryl Swoops,
Rebecca
Lobo also,
Sue Bird, Diana Taurasi,
when I think
Brianna
UConn,
Stewart.
Yeah, when I think UConn, I think white girls, quite frankly, white superstars.
I'm sorry, but I don't remember this being an issue at all. It brought popularity, it brought interest to women's college basketball. And, I mean, in the same breath that you could write it, they're writing this column as a freedom of thought, and they're putting this on paper in the USA Today. The WNBA just became the marketing arm. The face of the WNBA is about to become white. So is that also an issue? No. It's organic, and it's not about color. It's about what matters, the talent and the interest. And there's interest in women's college basketball because of Caitlin Clark. And it's not because she's white, it's because she's great.
Well, first off, let's look at the headline again here. I just want to show this as an example. This is virtue signaling 101 right here. Lindsay Schnell, white woman, with the story about women's basketball needs their face of the future to be black, is just comical on a lot of different levels. Look, I don't care, right? I'm not watching women's basketball because the face of women's basketball is white or black. I admire.
That's what I'm saying
greatness.
about the past. Just thinking about
I
it.
admire greatness at all turns, but I mean, let's also be completely honest here. I want to be intellectually honest on this show. It helps that Caitlin Clark is attractive, just like it helped that Candace Parker was attractive. And now I'm talking about a white woman and a black woman. It helps that Tom Brady is good looking with his celebrity. It helps that Aaron Rodgers is good looking too. I think there's a looks element to it. I don't think it's a racial element with it. The hope for women's college basketball is that Caitlin Clark, who, has been helped by all those great players that Hutton mentioned, Cheryl Swoops and Candace Parker and Cheryl Miller and Rebecca Lobo and Sue Bird. I'm naming women of different races when I talk about this, that it propels the sport into a different stratosphere of interest, not just by girls and women, but by boys and men also that admire the play of the players. And they admire the game and the way that it's played. I don't think that it matters one bit if the next face of college basketball is white or black. I think that just like, I've heard this countless times from minorities that say it was really cool to have representation when I turned on the television and saw someone who looked like me. I think that's likely important. And I bet there's some farm kids in Iowa and Nebraska and Illinois that turn on the TV and say, man, Caitlin Clark looks like my little sister. Caitlin Clark looks like the girl I know in middle school. And that probably draws people to the game. Great. You know who loves it? Fox, our employers. Because millions of people are watching college basketball because of it. I don't see that as a bad thing. Just like I don't see it as a bad thing if a small black girl from inner city wherever is hooping for her respective team, and that's bringing in more black fans. Great. Black, white, whatever. Doesn't really matter to me. I just, the whole thing is virtue signaling at its worst, and who cares?
Yeah, I mean, Angel Reese was a household name last year for women's college basketball, right?
Yeah.
It's not like it's gone away from taking it.
But Caitlin Clark is the show. Well, Angel
Reese was a part of the show last year. I mean, there's no doubt about that. She was mentioned as much as Caitlin Clark last year.
I don't think she's in the same stratosphere.
Not now. Not now, but I mean, Angel Reese was talked about more on this show than Caitlin Clark last year. Last college basketball tournament. No doubt.
I mean, her antics were talked about on the show.
But as far as the face of college basketball, it doesn't have to be a positive one or a negative one. It's just who's drawing interest. She was up. If you mentioned Angel Reese, you knew we were talking about women's college basketball.
Yeah, I don't think that.
How many players in the WNBA could you mention?
Well,
and I know it's WNBA.
Here's what I hate about articles like this, though. If ratings go down next year, and spoiler alert, they're likely to go down nationally because no Caitlin Clark. But this leaves it out there now to say, well, that's because people are racist. You know, the ratings went down because there's no white. The superstar college basketball is no longer white.
Well, if the ratings go up, ratings go up in the WNBA, or is it because of racism?
It's because of racism. That's what Lindsay. I'm not arguing that.
Oh, no, yeah.
Lindsay Schnell of USA Today. We can show you the headline again. This is her column. It is rinse and repeat. You could copy and paste this next year when the Indiana Fever set record-breaking numbers in attendance and television numbers next year. She's going to come back and say, racist America. Couldn't watch the WNBA when it was dominated by black superstars, but now Miss America Caitlin Clark is there, and suddenly everybody's tuned in watching the game. It's stupid. It's race-baiting stupidity to me.
But in the history of just the most legendary players from, Dawn Staley to Cheryl Miller, Cheryl Swoops, what does it matter if now the most dominating player is white versus black? It doesn't. Yeah, unless you want to make it a headline, unless you want it forced and you want it scripted and you, like you said, it's virtue signaling. And, nothing can be organic anymore. It's like, the Eagles-Chiefs Super Bowl, I believe it was, where you had Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes. We mentioned them. We didn't even cross our minds that the two quarterbacks were black. Didn't even cross our mind. But it was brought up because of, a columnist wanting to point this out or ESPN wanting to force feed it.
I'll say this about Dawn Staley now that she's running, the head of South Carolina, and they're by far the most dominant program in women's college basketball, and they're trying to finish off an undefeated season. Right now, they're undefeated in the SEC tournament, I think playing right now or played earlier today. She embraces the villain role, and I think that's good for women's college basketball. She's very much – there's a lot of John Thompson vibes with her. Whether it be – what was the whole thing with BYU? There was – she wouldn't schedule BYU or canceled a game because of that. It turned out to be an erroneous story about racial slurs being said, but she wouldn't back down from it. I mean, John Thompson built that Georgetown brand on being the black program. And he had all of black culture, hip-hop music, everything. They were wearing Georgetown starter jackets, and it was us against the world. They won a national title doing that. I mean, he coached Patrick Ewing and Dikembe Mutombo and Alonzo Mourning with that type of style. And now Dawn Staley is dominating women's college basketball. Again, I think that it's not just either or, like this Lindsay Schnell piece is writing, right? There's different vibes for everyone, and it's about what you're looking for. So if the next superstar women's college basketball is white, who cares? Because here's Dawn Staley still dominating the game as this outspoken black voice. I think all of that is good in the mix of everything, and it leads to more and more people watching the sport, and I hope more and more people watch the sport. My guess is, though, that ratings will slip next year without Caitlin Clark. And we've asked the question, I don't know the answer, what it's going to do for WNBA ratings. Don't know.
I mean, isn't it just horrible for the sport that the all-time leading scorer in women's college basketball history, in basketball history, is white?
Oh, I know.
That's the next headline.
You know what I haven't heard a lot of, though?
Asterisk next to that.
People saying that a black person needs to break Pete Maravich's record that she just broke. That's not the argument that I've heard. Hey, majority of great college, basketball players in general are black. We need a black man to pass Pete Maravich now, all-time scoring. I have not. I think I just gave USA Today the idea for their next column. So that they'll probably write about that next week.
Was that not a headline when Detroit Mercy couldn't get into a postseason?
Oh, of course, yeah. They're keeping this guy down in his sixth year.
They won't pay for this CBI tournament.
6th year Detroit Mercy, the coach's son, can't go play in this third level tournament behind the NIT.
Yep.